think I sent you quite a few of the things. I don't
Yeah,
know what
I
I did
have
send
them
you.
here.
But do you want me to just like briefly tell you what I think, or do you want to just tell me what you think, or?
Well, what I envision the subcommittee to do is figure out what questions need to be researched and answered. So it's like when Steve Schmidt stands, okay, that's what's wrong. When Steve Schmidt stands up at town meeting and says, how come, we can have a bill and we can have a revenue and they can't be matched up, they can't be a wash. It's because that's not the way the statute was written. So, but we need to be able to answer questions like that. And so that information is in that link to the DESE website. It talks about that.
Yeah.
So I feel like you have questions, I have questions, other people have questions, and the goal I have is to research the information so that we have the answers.
Okay. I first became interested in this issue when the town first used free choice, school choice in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back and looked at some emails I received from some of the principals involved, The reason,
What do you mean principals?
I mean, the
Literally,
principal, for example, the principal
Jackie.
and Becky and
Uh-huh.
Steve Sullivan and others, people's school committee.
2017.
So it's when we first raised it, because that was the first year that the school received any revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So we, the finance committee at that time, we said, well, okay, you're getting $14,000 here, we just strike that up your request.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we did. Okay, so then it came back and said you can't do that. And
What is it came back?
well, from this, Jackie sent an email
Mm-hmm.
saying you shouldn't reduce our numbers. We want to keep that other money for special reasons, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We can't reduce our budget.
Mm-hmm.
And Becky came back and said, and I don't have an exact quote because it wasn't in because we didn't even put it in the minutes. I just have the email correspondence that we just mentioned that we talked about it. So.
Mm-hmm.
But she said you can't touch it. It's not something we could even talk about. It's completely
Mm-hmm.
off the reservation for you to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
So I said that can't be possible.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, what happened that year was we did restore the money that we had cut out to the budget. Okay, that was the end of the subject that year because we were in the end of the road in terms of town meetings. So the next year I brought it up again, and Becky said something slightly different, which was that basically she had learned something about it, said it has a special status. It's doesn't go directly into town revenue, it goes into a special revolving account, which now I learned is true. And that's sort of verified by what I've read from my emails and stuff, and also my reading online of the state guidance and all that. So there's a special revolving account, as you probably know by now, that the school choice money goes into.
And the use of the word revolving
meaning that you don't spend it every year. It stays.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the account we have for. Let me just think.
It accrues and.
It accrues and it's spent as it's needed, and every year it has to. One has to do some people in town governments have to decide. It might be just the school. It might just be the treasurer. It might just be the finance committee. It might. It's not clear, but revolving accounts have some authority that decides when and if to spend them. Like, for example, Walter has a revolving account for fire hoses.
Yeah.
And it accrues money, then he buys fire hoses. Anyway, with the school choice is similar to that. And they're, like all state regulations, they're somewhat interpretable guidance given. Like it says, you cannot zero out the school choice money with incoming with outgoing.
Right.
So
that's the answer to Steve's question. In the statute, it says it's not.
You have to.
Washing.
They're separate things.
Yep.
You don't just zero it out one with the other.
Yeah.
But it does say it goes into a revolving account, and then it gives you a general description, which you've probably read, which I have printed here.
Yeah.
About what purposes it can't be used for. For example, it can't be used for capital projects.
Right.
But it could be used for things like special computer lab or even hires. I thought maybe hires were excluded, but they do mention hires as something. It can be support payroll, for example. So it can support other things in the school. So it gives a very vague, kind of general description about anything except capital expenses. But it's not meant to be. It's not meant to be to support the education of the students on the basic level. The state has law that says that every community has to support education. So say you're at community Z, and you want to use school choice, so you don't have to pay taxes to fund your school.
Right. Yeah, can't do that.
You can do it only after you've reached a certain minimum level of support for your school.
Right,
You have
right.
to do that through taxes.
Right.
So we are in no danger of doing that. We support education, well over the minimum. So, but so the question is then, this is the question, this is the thing that I personally think has been supported by my research into Pelham and Leverett, is that it's treated as revenue, it's listed in the revenue in the school budget. If the amount of money that's spent in a given year is determined by some combination of factors, like, for example, in the case of John Turkey tells me, they sit down with the school committee says, we have like $400,000. We'd like to put in 238 this year and keep 250 in there because we want to have 250 in there because we don't know what's going to happen next year. So then it's okay. So we want to keep 250 in this year. So we're spending the rest. Well, they spent 238 in FY21. They spent 240 in 225 in FY22, and they maintained a 250 balance. So that's them. Okay, that's just one example.
So that's them, where the FinCom asks the school what its plan is, and the school tells them the plan.
They work collaboratively.
Well, but that's part of this discussion, is how will the decisions be made? Yes, they can ask, and yes, the school gets to make a decision. It's also a bit of an anomaly because Pelham has so much choice money and so little other. They use choice as a large piece, even though you can see in the numbers they're going down.
Money.
Because they have a lot of students.
Well, of course, and because they don't have any students of their own.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So here the town comes to talk to the school, and the school recognizes that in fact the population is dominated by the effect of choice kids, and that for them that's keeping their school going because they wouldn't have enough students. So it's that dialogue gets to be, you can initiate it, but the discussion, I believe, from reading this and I want to find out more, is led by the school committee.
Well, see, I don't know about that. Let me just leave that aside. Can we just leave that aside for a minute? I just think my understanding of the basic spirit of this thing is that this school choice is really there for people in poor communities who feel that the parents feel they're not getting a good education, say in the town of, you name it, say it's Orange, right? And so they want to give their child a better opportunity, and they want to send them to, say, Shutesbury, okay? And so the town of Shutesbury is accepting the student. The program was designed for that student, not for the town of Shutesbury or for Pelham, for that matter. It's not meant to be a way to fund education per se. However, as it says in the rules, when the finance committee, as you recall, does fund the school, we decide how much to give the school. We don't micromanage what they spend it on, whether it's on salaries or whatever, except the capital part. But we say, here, you're getting $2.3 million, and and please, you requested 2.4, but we're giving you 2.3. But because we are collaborative and we support education, we go over the budget with them and we see where maybe we don't think that you should be doing this year or something. We do actually look at their budget. We review their budget. We don't in any way administer their budget. They have utter flexibility about that. So we don't tell them how to spend the school choice money. But what we can do is say, if you're getting if you have $200,000 in the bank in the revolving account, we'd like you to spend some of that to support your budget this year.
I know what you've been telling us for all this time. So so here it is on the minutes. When I was town clerk, it was very clear that there's lots of laws and statutes and policies, and they aren't all in concert with each other, and they tend to just be added on. So I know it's very hard to find out the root of something when you look at anything in the state. And then I know that in every community, you have all these people going through all this stuff, and they derive an interpretation of this, because the state will never be perfectly clear or coherent. And you have to sort of come to your understanding of it. And then you test it out a little bit to see if other people have that same understanding or not. So I believe that's where we are. It took a while for the school administration, and that includes U28 Bruce Turner, Jackie, and the town school committee. Took them a while to even recognize that they were accumulating school choice funding. Now that they have recognized it at this last,
Couple of years, that's all.
yeah, in this last year, I said to them in, I don't know, sometime, it would be good for you to develop a very clear policy on how you want to allocate school choice funding so that we can have a dialogue and we can understand your concept of this.
Yeah.
And it was a hellacious year for schools. It's been that way from COVID causing everything to be tipped over. It has been a process. I just realized I should be watching if anybody is in,
Yeah.
but I don't know where you see if
You
they're
would,
in.
you'd see guests over, let's see what your screen looks like.
This, no, so I think nobody, right?
Participants, yeah, there was no participants.
Okay, I just.
You're the only participant.
So this year, expecting a whole sort of discussion about this and policy being gelled didn't happen, and it probably wouldn't have happened. By the end of the year, there was an awareness that there were situations developing in the school that needed to be addressed, and the idea that there was an extra large preschool class and the preschoolers in general, because of COVID, had very little preparation for anything outside of their home. They hadn't been socialized, they hadn't been handling school materials, they hadn't been being with other kids, and so they're going like, we got a class coming in that we should break into pieces because there's some very specific needy kids in it, and then we need to augment the staff. So at the discussion before that specific came up, Jackie was very aware that with school choice money, since it's not a guaranteed income stream, you need to spend it on one-offs or limited use. And so by the end of the year, that was how they envisioned it. To me, this is very much their job and their role, and it would be more settling to the FinCom if we knew what that policy, what that spending framework, it's not even called a policy, I don't think, that framework looked like. And we will get there, and I feel we will. It makes me one, so my questions are, what kinds of frameworks do other towns use? The two frameworks would be, what do the schools think? What kinds of approaches do the schools use to put school choice money into their budget? And then how does the dialogue happen between the people involved, which would be the school committee, and the financial director and the FinCom. So I'd like to find out how other towns do this. That's how I survived being a town clerk. You can know what's out there, sort of, and you're not going to find a Bible that tells you, but you can find out how people approach this and recognize that there are different choices.
Yeah, there's no doubt about their parameters that we still have to stay within.
Mm-hmm.
But within those parameters, there's room for interpretation and personal choice. That's clear. There's no, but what my emphasis is as a member of the FinCom and as a person, as a financial person, my belief is that my understanding is that what the FinCom's role is to be a watchdog on town spending. So ultimately, our responsibility is to the taxpayer. Of course, we honor and respect all town departments, but we are sort of set up to be not in opposition, I won't say that, but to check on them and to make sure that we can justify what they spent. So that things that present the finiteness of money. And so we have to try to judge what the value of any kind of a proposed budget. So with the school, if they're getting revenue from another source, I want to count that.
Okay, I have a different perspective on the role of the FinCom, where you call it a watchdog for the taxpayer, I call it a resource gatherer for the town's welfare. So that's a pretty different view. My view for dealing with the school is to make them aware, to ask them what kind of policy they want to shape, or practices or protocols they want to shape, and to have some dialogue with that.
I absolutely agree with that, Susie.
Okay, so that's pretty different than being a watchdog. It's not saying I'm watching what you're doing. It's saying you have engaged in school choice, and they have a very specific. They have a specific policy that nails down each step of making decisions around enrolling children.
Enrolling children,
yeah, they already they have that, and they review it every year because that's part of what the policy says. And to the school community benefit, the first step is to allow any staff or faculty to choice in a student, their child. And the benefit to that is that it's a perk of working at Shutesbury. If you have a kid.
Yeah, no, but we had that before we even let them use. Now we're getting a little income out of it, but
yeah,
we had
right.
that benefit in the contract.
Well, so I'm just saying that it's, to me, the perspective is this is the school community taking care of itself, and now we need to clear up. Now we need to have a discussion around how the money, what the money is, make sure they know what it is at the every time, and talk to them about what ways they can spend it. They did know that it would be for limited time expenditures, and they can't roll it into the budget in an operational way. At the last school committee meeting, June maybe, Dan Hayes broached it again and said, you know, we need to look at this some more further, and maybe we'll come up with a protocol or a procedure for it. Maybe it will be we turn money into the budget and keep a balance that we choose. That would be modeled like the Pelham one. So it wouldn't be about a one-time need that they identify. It would be more about keeping a balance in their account. So that's another model. Yes, people need to talk about models, and we can offer that the discussion can happen, but it is their discussion. And so just like other things that the FinCom does, you help educate people by just having the discussion. It's not like we know more than they do.
I tried to initiate this discussion in 2017, and of course I met some pushback, and I've done some research. I knew little to nothing. I just knew that school choice was revenue.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about the rules. I didn't know about the state guidelines. I didn't know about the history.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know a lot of things, and I still don't know a lot of things. But I have learned a few things in the time that I've been engaged with this. And let me just say, the finance committee is the one that proposed that the school, in their contract negotiation, include the teachers in school choice instead of just getting free admittance, so that we actually. We were, someone on the finance committee was to raise that, okay?
Right, but it wasn't,
so it didn't cost the school anything, and it provided the town with some more resources that they weren't getting.
Right.
In the last contract.
Right, and it wasn't that they were opposed. I often think people have.
I don't think they were opposed. They just weren't thinking about it. But the finance committee
was. They were thinking of a lot of other things.
But I'm saying, Susie, that we had because we were in the financial mode.
Right.
And they were more in the education mode, being financial people. We thought of it as a way to save the town some money, and that's why it's there. And so that's a good thing, and it was not contested at all. I mean, it was not contested by anybody.
Right.
But I'll just say this about what Becky said. I think it was Becky that said, or maybe it was Jackie, that, we need this money because, it's not going to be there forever. Well, if we get increased enrollment, which everybody says we're going to have, we're going to get Chapter 70 money for our own students, and that's going to be greater than the school choice money we're getting now. So we're going to, if we lose some of these school choice students because we're not accepting as many because we have our own,
Mhm.
we're gonna have more revenue on our, coming in from the state. So that argument doesn't really make any sense. The argument, if Pelham needs a school, they're getting $5,000 or so for each choice student. That's
Mhm.
nothing. You know what it costs them per student?
Yeah, usually
Over
7 or 8.
20,000 a student for to run that school.
Hmm.
And they get 5,000 for choice. That's all that's doing is giving them a little bit of help. It's not really supporting the school. It can't. Because they don't get the Chapter 70 money for those kids. And the 70 money is better than 5 grants. So it's not even a wash for that. But then the taxpayer is still supporting the whole school, which costs over 20 per student. So, it's not a good thing for Pelham. I don't know what Pelham's gonna do. I personally think Pelham should join forces with Shutesbury.
Yeah, but you can, well, so
But that's a
not,
whole
yeah.
different subject.
Right. So, so what I'm proposing,
But you're
Well,
saying that you think the school has the call on this, and we should respect what their plans.
I'm saying we need to have a discussion to urge the school to come up with some criteria and some sort of plan. And I would like them to know at the beginning of every budgeting season what is in their school choice revolving funds. I'd like them to know that amount. I'd like to find out what other, like the stuff you sent us from Pelham is written up by Mike Morris. He writes the budget proposal. The school committee goes over it with him, and then they approve it.
Well, our budget is written by our district too.
Right.
So
So the people that are involved in this stream are the superintendent, and then that includes the financial director, and then we also have the school committee members, and we have the FinCom.
So Mike Morris now, Pelham is in part of the K through 6. So they're part of it. So
they're in a union.
I'm talking about our region. It's the K through 6 Amherst Pelham Grammar School.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
So they have the same financial director, you think, too?
Yeah, Doug Slaughter is
right.
the person. So, and this little scenario is acted out in every school district. And so we could find out some other ones. If we want to, we can find out some other ones. Is the school committee going to run around and look for this? Probably not. They are volunteering to do this other piece. So we could find out some other model.
Well, I went through the trouble to find out what Leverett and Pelham, because they were close by towns.
Right.
Just because I was told that it was not included in the budget in any town. That's what I was told, and I couldn't believe that could be true.
But these are the school budgets you're looking at.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the school budget for Shutesbury does not include the revenue from school choice.
Right, but when it's here, when it's in these school budgets, what we don't see on this paper is who put it there, how to get there, what policy put it there, what practice put it there. That could have been the financial director. He could have been talking to the superintendent or to the principal. We don't know how it got there.
What's the difference how it got there?
Because your model tends to talk coming from the FinCom to them.
No, the budget comes to us, but if it doesn't
I understand that, but you want to make decisions, financial decisions.
No, I don't. I just don't want them to not to count the revenue that they receive. That's all.
Well, what counting the revenue, what that is defined as is not. It depends on what you think that means.
I mean. Let's use another example as part of the school's revenue. You look at the school's budget, any of the schools, including Shutesbury, you'll see when they have state grants for, say, special ed or any other child development, whatever it might be, and it's listed as revenue on their budget.
Right.
So the school choice is not. That's my objection. That's it. That's it.
Right. There. Okay. So from my talking to them over the course of last year, it seems to me that all that's lacking here is is asking them to set up a protocol or a process for how they want to spend their school choice money. And if they say, we want to accumulate it till this, or we want to spend it on this particular project, that's very much what I see in the Leverett and Pelham.
What you see there is they list the expenses in the budget for the school, then they list the support.
Right,
And they include the amount that the levy is going to provide.
right,
So, but they subtract before they provide that amount. The way is by subtracting the other revenue.
right.
So they subtract the school choice from
Right.
the request.
Right.
And anything that's in the request.
But they also probably, they could come up with what amount they want to use through different avenues. One could be a specific program or need they want to address, and they could, that costs this much money. Or they could have a general policy, which is, we have this much in our revolving fund, we'll spend it down to X. So those are two pretty different ways, and I don't know which way Shutesbury wants to choose, but it's up to them to choose. And we're up to encouraging them to make that plan or discuss that plan, make it clear.
Well, yeah, I mean, Susie, and maybe we're talking at cross purposes. I'm not saying anything about telling them what to do, but when they come to us with a budget, just like when Walter or anybody else comes with a budget, we look at the budget. If Walter, part of his budget says something we don't think the town needs because of our whatever budgetary concerns we might have, we might say, do we have to do this year? Because we don't really want to spend that money on X.
Or we don't get to do that with the school committee. No.
We get to, that's why they present us with a budget. They don't just present us with a number, they present us with a budget, which has lines on it. Yeah. We don't get to control their spending when we give them the money, but we can try to control the allocation. And they support their budget request with a detailed budget. So it's not like that we precisely control their spending, but they're bringing a budget to us saying, this is our salaries, this is our whatever other expenses we list, and this is what we want. And then this is the other revenue we get other than levy support. So this is the amount we request from the FinCom for the budget this year. So it's...
No, that there's some, so we look at...
Here's the budget right here.
Wait, so we look at the regional school budget. We don't go into the lines. We may say, we can or can't fund the bottom line, but we don't go into, so it's not comparable to what we say to Walter.
Right.
It is not. It's different that way. So the town can say, and we do this through our regional mess that we argue with. We can't fund X. We can't fund a bottom line number of X. And I believe that's the same with the school. So you're saying the FinCom can question their budget, but you're not talking, you originally were saying not just on the bottom line.
Yeah, well, I do. That ultimately, I agree with you that we have the control over the appropriation. Now, see, we have a control over the appropriation, but as a matter of the discussion with the department, whatever it might be, we can say, well, you know, we're trying to tighten our belts this year. Can we look at this? Can you do something about that line? Can you put that up or whatever? We say that to people all the time. Maybe we can't. Technically, I know we have no control. They have complete autonomy about their spending.
Right.
But it says here, this is the state guidelines from the Mass Education. The appropriating body, which is the FinCom, however, may take into account the availability of school choice revenues and other special revenues in deciding how much to appropriate above net school spending requirement.
Right, I know
that's the salient point to me.
Right, okay, and that's one piece. And, you know, if we sit down with the school committee and Bruce and Jen and Jackie, we could say this piece is here. That could be part of the policy. We could also suggest another process, which I believe would be to make, ask them to tell us what's in their school choice revolving fund at the beginning of the year. Tell us in general what their policy will be to use school choice money. Tell us what they're doing specifically in that budget, in this budget year to use it. And to me, that's the end of the discussion.
Well, see, now here's where you and I think, identifying a difference of opinion here at least. My concept is that, and I think you've agreed in some way, but in a kind of convoluted way, that the school choice money is being used to support some items in the budget. I just say, yeah, school choice is being used. So present us with the budget, whatever it might be, and then say, this part is being funded, part of our budget is being funded, nothing specific, but part of our budget is being funded by school choice. Part of it's being funded by the levy. And then we said the budget, we want to fund the budget minus 0.5% or something, like it's still, it doesn't, we're not telling them, but you can't just use the school choice as a slush fund and then have your budget sort of exclusive of that. In other words, say the budget last year was flat, okay? Say it was just went up 0%, or say it went up 1%. And then you had $150,000 of choice money you spent in addition. Well, essentially that was part of your budget. You spent that money last year. So that's what I'm saying is it should be part of the budget, the total budget, and then the funding source should be partly school choice. That's all.
I don't.
I mean, like, for example, why did the school go out and buy, they took some money from choice after their budget had been approved, and they spent it on Wi-Fi, okay? Now, I asked Dan to look into spending, getting money from the federal grant for the Wi-Fi. They had told us they wanted to spend $8,000 on Wi-Fi, when Jim Hemingway said him and I could go down to Radio Shack and give him Wi-Fi for a couple hundred. And they spent $8,000 on Wi-Fi. That was wrong. I think we should have been able to stop that, or at least, at the very least, they should have spent federal money, not school choice money on it.
That level of micromanaging seems totally inappropriate to me.
That's not
that school gets to decide. That school gets to decide what it needs. And if they fund it out of school choice money, that's their decision also. I can't imagine that.
Wasn't in the budget, so.
Well, and they also didn't have it in the budget because they didn't have COVID lessons outside where they needed to extend.
Yeah, I understand.
They're dealing with their reality, and they found a resource to do it. And to me, all of that is their business, and they did that, and they took care of it, and it allowed them to do something they needed to do.
Well,
and that's the kind of autonomy I believe they deserve.
It's fiscally irresponsible when you see. I called Dan and I said, I saw this note that $8,000 for Wi-Fi. It occurred to me that this could be something funded by the state, the federal grant money, CARES Act, whatever. And so he said, I'll look into it. So he sent an email to Jen, and then Jen forwarded it to Bruce. And Bruce said, I'll look into it. It's going to get an email back that was I was CC'd in. Yeah, we can fund that with CARES Act. Thanks, Dan. Well, then it turns out it wasn't funded with CARES Act. So that was a mess up in my view.
And I feel they are
not against the Wi-Fi.
They're working as hard as they can to keep things going, and they're not. And they have a lot of priorities to attend to. And if they solved a problem that needed to be done right then, I feel that's fine. That's what their job is to do. It's to make sure that education can keep going forward, even in a pandemic and when you have to have kids outside. So they did that, and I don't have a problem with it. I did ask Bruce. So one thing that's, so what I want to clarify is, I would probably send, so the school committee doesn't meet until September, but I would put on their agenda this model of these are the people that we see involved, and we want to know if they can shape some sort of process and protocols for including school choice funding. Tell us what their criteria would be, and talk to us about what it is. It's not like we're supposed to approve it. I want to just have a dialogue. And so this, I would probably send this to the school committee and urge them to get started with this now. I also want to see if that's how other schools do it. And so when I talk, well, one of us needs to talk to, say, Mike Morris and Doug Slaughter, because they represent, because even in that, even if it is, that would only be for Pelham. That would be the Pelham model. And also the model, like, is Amherst Regionals, do they have choice in students?
I'm sure they have choice.
And
yeah.
so there's an understanding of what that looks like to them. So there's two levels. There's the one for Pelham. There's the one for the regional school. There's a model that Leverett thinks of. And when I say Leverett, it's all of the stakeholders in that process. It's the superintendent, it's the financial director, it's the school committee, and that will vary from town to town how people interpret the roles of the different people and what kind of policy they develop. So I do want to see what those are, and I do want to urge our school committee and superintendent and financial director to make it clear what Shutesbury process will be. And then what happens in our discussions is that you leak it over to wanting to micromanage the Wi-Fi.
No, it's not that at all, Susie. I'm using an example of the role of the finance committee in saving money to the town. That's what I think is my job.
Okay, and I see that very different. I see you're micromanaging.
No, I'm not micromanaging. I'm helping.
But you're saying Jim and I can go down and put it on this, do that.
I didn't say I wanted to do that. I said that this is what all this requires. I'm knowledgeable about construction. Jim's very knowledgeable about technology. And we know that you can get a router for $400 or $500, or two or three of them, put them around the school, and you can wire them. You get a company to do that. And it's not a big deal. It's not $8,000. That is why we got involved, not to micromanage, but to help them understand that.
Micromanaging.
No, it's not. We didn't want to do it.
You were telling them how else it could be done, rather than allowing them to make their decisions in the flow. And so then you criticize them and you tell them where the money could have come from and all that. That is not where I want to go with this. I want to know. And, you know, you read the last paragraph of that DESE thing. If you read the other ones, you also have a sense of where they think they're setting up the school districts to behave. They're enabling blah, blah, blah. They're setting up something. And so that's part of the framework. That last paragraph is in there, and it can be part of our discussion when we get to this place where we're talking these people. There's another thing that might feel unrelated, but it reminds me very much of how the state does things, is that it has in the FinCom, Mass Association of Town Finance Committees, it has this thing.
Yeah, I don't imagine that we don't provide the school with something that represents the growth in our budget every year.
So I don't know how this happens. This doesn't say how it happens. When we got that money, the growth in revenue from the Wheelock project, was a certain percentage allocated to the schools for that?
Well, we certainly didn't see a tax break from it.
That's not the answer to the question.
No, our budget, in other words, we spent the money. We didn't reduce anything.
And, but when this is this reminds me exactly of how the state does things. This bunch of paragraphs says some stuff. This says something else. I don't know much about this, but it is, it's not a sort of linear process. So I don't know what happened with that. I don't know if that's the increase, if that was the increase I don't know if we have a process of making that increase when we end up with revenue that we didn't have before. And so it meant to me that it's not, that school choice stuff is not in isolation. It's part of a bigger picture, parts that I don't understand, parts that I don't know how they're enacted. Who checks on this? Do we know what that is? But I do believe it's part of the state's intent in terms of its support for school.
Well, if you read this document, the quote that I,
Mhm.
there's, the state actually has a requirement for every town of the minimum that they should spend on
Mhm, yeah.
education. And we are well above that.
You know, that's funny because we wrestle with that in the regional school agreement, but I don't hear that in our process for the elementary school.
Well, I asked Becky and I asked Dan about that. And they told me, I said, I assume, and I'm not really cognizant of the actual numbers, but I assume we're well above the minimum. And they said, oh yeah, we're well above. Both of them, Becky and Dan. So again, I don't know the actual numbers, but I just assume that because we support education, unlike some skinflint towns,
Mhm.
that we're well above. So we managed to stay well above those thresholds in Shutesbury, which I don't, it doesn't surprise me.
That might be also, it's reflected in the level of chapter, what is it, 70 money that we get. That is the state looking at our contribution and our wealth factors and all that, and then saying their state aid
Yeah, you know,
is
one
lower.
thing we have to be careful about is all this bragging about how our property values are going up, which that's going to change our assessment, you know, if they do.
Yeah.
And it's going to suck because
Right.
I'm
I
not
brought
selling-
that up
I'm
at the
not selling
beginning.
my house. I don't want property values to go
Right,
up.
I brought that
I
up
want
at the
Shutesbury to be
beginning. So if
affordable.
you burn all those bridges, then they're burned.
What do you mean burning them? I'm not burning any bridges.
No, the wrestling around the agreement is saying we're going to shift from enrollment to the wealth factor, and we want to speed that up. It's like, okay, then be ready for when your wealth factor changes
Well,
relative to other three towns. Just be ready for it. I'm not saying,
Okay,
but
again, the reason I bring that up is not because my wealth factor is going nowhere but down, personally. But I don't like this, all this, everybody rubbing their hands together saying my property value is going up. I don't want to move, Susie. I don't care if my property values go up.
yeah.
So I just think it's going to hurt me because then it's going to change that. So there's a rich guy living, you know, behind me or something, and who's going to want all kinds of services I don't really want, and then he's going to have all the money in the world. I don't really look at that as a good
Yeah.
thing, you know.
So what I think this subcommittee effort is meant to do is to find out how other towns and other school districts have codified or laid out or whatever their process of school choice funding expenditures. And then when we have some sort of broader idea than what isn't happening here yet, then we can begin to speak to the school committee and say, we'd like some more dialogue and clarity on this. Here's some of the things we've learned. What kind of process do you want to evolve to? And I don't think that will meet any resistance. I feel like that's the end of it, that then when they make decisions in their budgets and they make decisions in running their school, that is their business. If you or other people on the FinCom want to say, we disagree with that budget line, that bottom line, we want it to be X, then the committee argues about it and then we come to a vote. I don't want to go down their backs about how they manage their budget.
Yeah, okay, but I guess maybe, so you understand me, if we're going to disagree, you might as well understand what my point of view is. I don't, couple of things. One, I'm a FinCom representative to the capital planning.
Mm-hmm.
And capital planning, capital expenses and capital investments are different matters than the budget items.
Mm-hmm.
So using, say, for example, school choice money for capital is not appropriate, in my view. It should be a review process as a process that is fair to everyone, that is empathetic to every request for education. But there's a process that is open and transparent and that requires critical analysis and review of every proposal. That's what I think is our role as FinCom members, not to be mean or to be anti-school or anything like that's not even remotely my position. But it is to be analytical and to offer my expertise, such as it might be, to any problem. So, for example, again, you probably think it's micromanaging, but the school wanted to replace the boilers, and the school was wrong about it. They didn't need boilers, and they were going to spend $60,000 on boilers they did not need. And I feel happy that I was able to prevent them from making that mistake, saving the town and the school that expense. They'd be better off spending the money on something else. So again, that I think is perfectly legitimate role for us members of the FinCom to play, to be part of a transparent kind of not oppositional as much as different interests. There are different interests for different parts of our government that are represented in different departments, and the FinCom's got a different perspective than the people running the school. And that's okay. That's the way it should be. And sometimes they're going to disagree. Do you think that's inappropriate?
I need to think more about the autonomy of a school budget compared to other departments in the town, and where that comes from. What's the point of that model that I believe is I believe it's in the way school budgets are organized. I don't think we've made that up, but I'll think about that some more.
Well, help me understand it better too, because if I don't understand it, I'd like to understand it better.
Well, I don't know. So I mean, to me, the reason I'm asking for a subcommittee is that I think this information needs to be made clear. And, so when I thought about where would I get this information from, I do need to probably take this information and talk to DESE about it. I do know, like all bureaucracies, you can call down there and get, Freddie one day and Samantha the next day and not end up with the same understanding of what it is. And that's okay. I mean, that's the way life is. Nobody's doing this specifically to Shutesbury or whatever. So I believe I need to call and ask some questions, and that's, I sort of want to generate the kinds of questions that will make things clearer to us and ask them. But then I also realized, because I was town clerk, whatever DESE thinks, it still is open to interpretation by each and every community. And that's why I want to talk to APRS, and I want to talk to Bruce Turner. He's worked in a few different schools. He's probably seen, or school districts, he's probably seen different understandings of this. Those understandings don't have to be, we don't have to adopt them, but I think it's helpful to understand that people come at this in different ways, and we then have enough information to sit down and have a conversation with the school committee. The school committee is a bunch of people that volunteer, and they haven't necessarily led this discussion or thought about these things. They're busy thinking about some other, pressing things, especially given COVID times. So,
yeah, well, that is the value of having a town government with different parts, because then their interactions can produce better results.
Right, and so
we want better outcomes for everyone.
Right, and so those interactions to me are absolutely discussions. They are listening and searching. So that there's also, I was just realizing, there's also what do you call them? Groups like the superintendent group. There's a group of superintendents, and there's a group of I bet there's a group of financial directors. And actually, I have a brother-in-law who works in the business office down in Peabody. and let me guess, they have a different view of things. So I don't know if this group of superintendents have come up with, and I have a statement about school choice funding and how that is figured out, how people figure it out. So,
Well, you know, as you said yourself, look, they passed the school choice, just so you recall the history. They passed it to help disadvantaged students. And just like any other state promulgation of a rule, it had unforeseen and manifestly,
right.
while different, maybe some unwanted side effects. And so some towns would start to exploit it. Naturally, some towns would start to exploit it, and they would be degrading education in their town. It's not what they want. So they changed the rule, they modified it, they tweaked it. And so what we have is what we have. And let me tell you, I think I have a lot of problems philosophically with school choice that are, you know, outside strict financial ones for Shutesbury. Like, for example, poaching students from other towns. I mean, like, so we can fill our classes. Because I was told by Steve the other day that the school wants to have, I don't remember the number, 18 or 19 kids per class or something. That's the ideal for them. So when they have under 18, they want to get a choice student and plug that kid in. But they have to make a commitment to the student because they can't just, you know, it's not like baseball where they can just fire people and get a replacement. Anytime. So it's a difficult choice for them. That's one other definition of choice. But they're trying to maintain what they consider to be optimal level of class size. But they do worry about the fact that they're taking some other student out of somebody else's class. It's like, so it's kind of and it's no way, like with Pelham's in a really bad fix, like I tried to say. They're spending a lot of money, and when they get some of their parents take their kids and put them in Shutesbury or something, or some other place, that must really call them because they can't get the 70 money from that kid anymore.
Right.
So I don't know what they're going to do, but I'd hate to see Shutesbury in a situation like that. I really would. You know?
Right. Well, and I think Shutesbury has, the state sets up something, and Shutesbury has a way of using it. And in this case, they found, once they figured out you could get school choice money, they went and supported their staff, and that makes their staff sort of, it's helpful to have staff that has an investment in being there, and they would because they have a perk that didn't happen before. So, yeah, those are the unintended consequences.
Well,
it has a positive part, it has some negative part, and they are being cautious to not end up in the situation. And you have, I mean, to me, this all came out of the Republicans when they really wanted to do charter and school and, letting people go to religious academies instead of having to go to public school. I mean, this whole choicing thing Reagan really pushed it. And so here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
You have to say, as a person from a poor city, from Lawrence, a lot of my sisters live in Lawrence. A couple of my sisters live in Lawrence, and they have kids and grandkids. It's one of these things where it's actually beneficial to people in those communities to go to charter schools because the public schools suck so bad there. So then you get other communities, richer communities like Amherst or Newton or something, and they're developing these like academies for their kids and undermining the schools, in the neighboring towns. So it's obviously like everything else that people do, it's abused, it's corrupted somehow. But there are some aspects to it which are kind of beneficial to some kids, some families. But look, this is the problem we have. This is the demographic problem.
Right.
That doesn't.
Right.
That's the big thing,
Yeah. And then, but also because we're such a small school, this graph doesn't work very well. I don't know. I know this number's up now this is 2020. We already finished 2021 and it went up and it's going up again for 2022. So, yeah. And Nate, just had his second kid and he's over on Pratt Corner Road and he's surrounded by people with kids.
Now, is he living in Amherst?
No, he's in Shutesbury.
That's what David's father's on?
Yeah, and he is there's a huge group of people having babies in his age group. So he has a 2-year-old and now a 2-month-old, and he has many friends on that road exactly in the same, and up around Henry Street, which isn't his
Yeah,
town.
right.
But
Yeah,
it's
right.
it's just happening, and so these things come and go, and you know, it's hard to make your school go.
No, but I mean, this is something that's been going on for 20 years, statewide. It's not just
Yeah,
not
no.
just our town. No.
Right.
Because
So
look, people like your generation, my generation, unlike you, I didn't have any kids. So
mhm,
I did my part to keep population under control.
mhm,
But as a group, as a generation, the baby boomers put a lot of kids out there, and then their kids put out other kids.
mhm.
And then it seems to be tapering off. And guess what? For a lot of young people, they can't even afford to get married and have kids right now.
Mhm.
They're poor.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's something else going on right now.
There is,
and
yeah.
and it is an increasing group, and I'm not sure under what, how long it'll play itself out, and what impact it'll have on the school. So his oldest daughter's 2, and so starting next year, she could go to preschool in Shutesbury. So the launch in is pretty fast, and we'll see. And that's why I can imagine school districts are cautious about how to spend school choice money, and we just want to know what
Look, we're
kind
gonna
of policy would they find doable.
Well, we're going to run into this. We're going to have another meeting, I assume, right? You and I.
Mhm, mhm.
So think about my position. I'll think about what you're saying, and maybe if you want to send me an email and notify, just give me a kind of a memo of what you say, what your position, what our difference is. Just give me your interpretation. Of
That's,
it.
but I don't find that purposeful. I don't want to argue
I'm not
about,
arguing. I'm talking about it.
no, I don't want to focus on 2 different points of view. I want to figure out what questions are being raised, where the information can be found to help address those questions, and then what steps to take that will move towards a solution that we find helpful to those questions. So when we find people standing up at town meetings saying, well, how come it's not a wash? That's here. We know that that's here. I want to find out how other towns are addressing it, districts are addressing it, and then sit down with our towns people, the superintendent, blah, 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 and come up with, and find out what they find to be a good, safe bet for using school choice
Okay,
money.
well, this is the finance committee subcommittee, so I think that our responsibility is to try to come to get clarity about the issue which I raised, which is why isn't school choice money in the budget as a supporting revenue? And that's what I would like to see. And if I'm wrong about that, which Becky says I was, and I think maybe you're saying that, then I could be persuaded that I'm wrong.
I'm not saying, see, that's an interesting thing. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm saying it's clear Shutesbury School Committee has not made a clear plan for using school choice money. And we'd like to help them do that. We'd like to have one so that we can answer questions when they come to us. We'd like to have one so that we're not just saying, where's your school choice money? We would like to see what kind of protocol or process they want to work on, they want to have.
Well, certainly, I would like the finance committee to meet with the school committee on this subject, but I would like the finance committee to have a consensus about what their point of view is, what they think is the right way to go on this.
How would you have an idea of what the right way to go is until you understand ways that the way I've learned something is I look at how other people figured it out and what goes,
what do you think
what
of these documents I
values.
provided you with from Leverett and Palomar?
That's not,
and from the state.
That's
what they're all about, exactly what you're saying. I did
not
research
at all.
about.
We don't know how it got into that Leverett budget. We don't know how it got into the Pelham budget. We see it there. I'm not saying it shouldn't be there.
I'm saying it should be there.
And I'm not saying it shouldn't be there. I'm saying we don't know. We need to see what model works for school choice funding for Shutesbury as designed by the stakeholders in it, which the finance committee can hear it, but I don't particularly feel like it's our bailiwick.
It is
I
our
do
business.
think it will end up in there. And in fact, I asked for the final Shutesbury budget, and it's not in there. That doesn't would it jibe with what I heard in the probably May or April, maybe May, school committee meeting. So I sent another email to Bruce and said, where is the school choice funding in this budget? And were the issues that Jackie identified to fund with school choice, has that changed? And I didn't hear back from him. Another big problem is it's summer. It's very hard to hear from people in the summer. People come and go all the time. So I hoped to hear, I emailed him last Thursday and Friday, and I didn't hear from him. So I will follow up with him. And I know it takes a while for the issue and the ins and outs to come up enough for people to realize, oh, we need to do X, Y, and Z to make this happen. We need to have a process where
Well, the school committee's not going to meet for the rest of the summer, right?
they might meet in August, the next time is September, but that's good because we can write to them.
Yeah.
If by September, we should have a clear enough idea of some of the pieces of this puzzle and be able to suggest that they put it on their agenda and have a time where they start, and they might need a subcommittee. They may need somebody who sits down and makes their proposal, or maybe Bruce does and brings it to them and says, here's some ways other towns have managed their school choice funding policies, use of that, and
Well,
here's what I
I'd like
suggest.
to ask Bruce, for example, the Leverett budget, which I believe, I assume that Bruce had some role in putting that together, since they're in Union 28.
Right.
Shows school choice as a revenue supporting the budget, yet it doesn't shoot me. So why is that?
Right. So that's not what so what I'm saying is we go to that group, the superintendent, financial director, school committee, and we say, how does this play itself out in Amherst, Leverett, Pelham? How does this thing work? And maybe we can go to a website they have, and they'll have it at policy. Maybe we'll see it.
Well, let me just tell you, I've already done some homework on this. I've talked to John Trickey, and I didn't talk to Mike Morris or Doug, but I did talk to Bruce a little bit. And the way John, who's very easy to talk to and very nice, he said, they come to us and they propose they're going to spend this much on school choice, and we say, well, is it the right number or not? We discuss it with them, and then we approve their budget at whatever number we decide is the right number. But they put it in as part of their budget, as supporting revenue for their budget every year, and we don't do that.
What's missing? I don't. Shutesbury just hasn't gotten there yet. It's not going to get there. But what you didn't say in that sentence is, how did the school committee come up with that number? What's their thinking? What is their basic orientation? Are they doing keep this minimum in our account? Are they doing, oh, we know we're going to need this, and that's what it costs? The school committee has a piece of this, and so does
I'm not saying that
Mike Morris. That's probably Mike Morris and Doug Slaughter probably have even more of a codified idea of how they see it, because they're probably doing it in Amherst Regional and in Pelham and in Amherst Elementary. Oh, there's another group. I wonder how they come up with it.
Well, I'll tell you something. In the last year's budget for the regional school, the school choice number changed about two or three times.
Yeah.
Because of all the different negotiations that were going on with, say, Shutesbury and other things,
Right.
and the union and all that. And so then they said, we're going to take more from school choice. Then they said, oh, we're going to take less. Now we're going to take more again. So the school choice was kind of used as a cushion for some of the other financial decisions, but it was always in the budget.
Yeah. But in Shutesbury's, it not being in the budget, I believe, is only because it hasn't gotten to that place. It hasn't figured it out. It's not, and so here we are in a position, and that's why I say I don't see us as watchdogs. I see us as resource people helping to pull the resources together. And in that is the education of the school committee. I know from sitting in on the school committee meetings, those are people who are learning. We have one new one this year and one vacant seat because Jen
Yeah,
Brown
somebody
had
just
to
quit,
pull.
right?
Yeah. And she had to pull out because there's some illness that she has to deal with in her group. I don't know where it is, but it's serious. And so, oh yeah, people have lives. Oh yeah, younger people have even more difficult lives because is it her parent? I don't know, but that's highly likely. So what happens? There's a person who was pretty experienced. She has to walk away. And so now we have a new person, Bethany Rose, and we have an unknown, which
Bethany Rose is that her name? Last name is Rose.
yeah.
Never heard of her.
And Marcus Rose is her partner, and they live down at the lake. And he's the guy that services the elevators. He works for somebody that does the elevators, and he does our town elevators. And she has kids, and usually you want to have somebody with kids on the school committee. And usually people, when they don't have kids, are less interested in what's going on in the school.
No, it's the same with the Little League.
Yeah, so here we go. We're going to have two new people. So
they're going to probably be highly passionate, but don't know anything about how.
No, I don't know. I found Jen Brown to be totally
no, but she was on there for a
reasonable and
few years.
logical, right? So, but she always was that way. That's who she is. So, and I do believe we will. I don't know who's going to step up to fill in the one vacancy, but.
So they don't have the vacancy filled yet.
Right. So Bethany Rose is filling in for Katie Fiander, who termed out.
Yeah, and Bethany Rose was elected then.
Yeah, and Jen was elected, but then had to pull out. But that's so everything about town government. It's a bunch of volunteers trying to figure it out, and you can't, and it takes time, and that's why people like the superintendent, Jackie, Bruce, will help lead the school committee to figuring it out. And I think, I don't think it will take that much time. I do think they were fairly unaware of that fund over there because they're doing this. And you cannot underestimate what the last year and a half to 2 years has been like to run a school. It's insane. It's insane. And it's not getting clearer. What's going to happen in the fall is still going to be difficult. And so while they're doing that, we are going to ask them to come up with this understanding and policy. And that's why I want to get some information about what other towns do and give them some ideas of what choices they can make. And then they make it. And that's an assignment. And, giving people assignments is not easy. So that's how I see it.
Look, this thing started from me because I brought the issue of school choice in 2017. And I was given information which I didn't find satisfactory in return. So I've done my own, try to do my homework. I'm a volunteer too.
Mm-hmm.
I had plenty to learn. I still have plenty to learn.
Right.
But I'm learning, and I'm starting up to be able to pick some stuff up along the way. And right now I'm pretty clear on this, that this should be in the budget. And that's what I'm going to be pushing for.
But
I think it should be there, and we shouldn't be a slush fund that they can spend on top of their budget.
I'm not saying that. That's you and I are not in polar opposites.
I'm just being clear about what my position is.
But I feel like that method, that perspective, is jumping over here and then having a problem where I think it's like this.
Okay, well, I've gone step by step. It's like 17 is a long time ago.
Well, step by step is not, so I believe the steps are find out from the stakeholders involved what kinds of policies and processes are available and encourage them to make one. That's all.
Well, we'll work together with them. I think that we have responsibilities too. The taxpayer, the FinCom does. And we want to have clear and we want to have open. We don't micromanage anything in the school, as you pointed out, but we do allocate the funds that they have.
Right, but you have a lot of contentiousness around their decisions, and then and your solution or your suggestion is a micromanaging
What do you
suggestion.
mean?
When you go back to your example about the Wi-Fi. So.
I was trying to help them. They told me as a member of the FinCom, that they were spending $8,000 for Wi-Fi. I found that to be a surprising number. I did some homework on it, and I found out I was right. It was a surprising number because it was way too much. So I went and looked into whether it would be covered by federal money. And I talked to.
Yeah, I heard all this. You don't have to say it again.
Okay, but.
So I'm just
so you
saying
said
that
something
comes out as,
mischaracterized me. I
No,
wasn't being
that-
contentious, not at all. That's not contentious, Susie.
well,
I'm doing my job.
that's,
If I was working for you on your house and you come up with and I told me you're going to spend $8,000 on outside Wi-Fi, it would be my responsibility to make sure you didn't waste your money on it.
that's not a good analogy. And I get to make, for my life, I get to make decisions. I can ask you, and then I can make my decisions. They solved a problem that needed solution as soon as they started having classes outside. So it's good. I feel like that's good. And it was helpful for them to solve that problem. And I bet there are more, it'll be more of that coming along. And they did submit, a fair number of CARES Act things, and it can't be perfect. People did the best they can in incredible amounts of work. So I'm not
asking for perfection. I'm just trying to do my job I'm not a skinflint, but I'm very, very conscious of trying to get jobs done efficiently. So,
all right. So
let's have another meeting in a couple of weeks. What do you think about
but what are we going? So what I want to do is I will probably talk to, because I don't want us to both ask the same people. So I will go to Mike Morris and Doug Slaughter and ask them how do the schools they work with come up with their spending plans for school choice, and are there any specific policies they follow? Are there general goals? And I'll probably talk to the maybe I'll talk to DESE and find out where they think that information is held. Like, is it among the superintendents? Is it among, so I don't know, maybe they have more information on their website, but, and then, yeah, so those are two things I'm gonna do. Find out where some of the information or some of the history or some of the ways people come up with that information on school choice funding spending. So I'm going to say to them, where will I find information about how school districts and towns come up with school choice funding spending plans? And I'm going to ask that of Mike. Of course, he probably wants to be on vacation before the next onslaught, because it didn't end,
Yeah, well, I'm going to be, I'll show you what I'm going to be out of town for a week. Let's see if I figure it out. 25th or something.
And anything I get from these people, I'll forward to you.
Yeah, I'm leaving on the 23rd for that week.
August 23rd. And is that a Monday or something? What am I
Well,
looking
I'm
at?
leaving Tuesday morning, but I'll be getting,
Yeah.
sort of taking Monday night as a time. I'll be prepared to leave. So.
Okay. And I think it would be premature. Oh, do you want to check in with Bruce Turner on those in that same way? What ways?
I'll call Dan and Bruce.
What ways? But we're not looking for them to come to their conclusion. We're asking how it could be done. You know, I believe there's going to be two pretty different ways, or those two ways could interact, which is we keep a certain amount because we don't know what's coming in the future on hand, and we spend for specific projects each year. And
well, see, I don't think you're going to find that. It supports the budget in general. That's what you see in the budget. That's how it's written in the budget.
But you don't know what the discussion was at the school committee.
It does. You say we can't micromanage the budget. It supports the budget. The bottom line of the budget number.
No. So
supported by the
what
school
we
trustee.
want is for the school committee to come up with a sense of how to do this, and we want to know what that is. I'm
Right.
not saying micromanage it. I'm saying communicate about it.
Okay, I don't have a problem with reviewing the budget together with the school committee. That's part of our job. To review the budget, they give it to us line by line. We look at it, we ask questions about whatever line we might not understand or whatever. But at the end, there's a bottom line number that we're supposed to allocate, that they're requesting.
But you're saying, and we want you to spend school choice funding in that before the bottom line. And I'm saying, fine. And what would be your, and in order for them to get to that place, they need to sort of have an understanding of how to do that. And so that's what I want to help them be aware of, because I don't think Shutesbury has a very clear awareness of this yet.
Right.
I did not get that from listening to them. And when I suggested it at the beginning, actually the first time I think I was misunderstood, and they told me what the the school choice kids in policy was. And then I said, but there's monies that are sitting there, and how do you want them to get spent? And that's where we ended up. So so then before the end of the year, I understood there was going to be some school choice funding, and I don't see it in this. And so I need to know what happened. Did they?
You're talking about Shutesbury.
Yeah, and it's not in the Shutesbury budget. So I want to know what happened. And I get it that they might have forgotten. They might have decided they don't have space to add that extra preschool. I didn't really know how they were going to do it. But whatever they decided, I just like to know what happened. So that's a communication, not for me to tell them what to do or to tell them I think they what they should do. I just want to know. And I want them to become more and more clear about this. And I think they will. I don't think there's a problem with that. It just
What
doesn't
about this?
happen yet.
This question I have. This is something I don't know the answer to, but something you might want to ask people in Boston if you talk to them. When we're taking school choice in, from our choice students are all K. They're all K through 6. They're preschool students. There's no choice in school.
Right.
So, but why? How is it that we're funding preschool out of a choice program, which is based on our elementary and kindergarten? Is that right?
So you're asking, are there any parameters for, and I'll read that part again. But it, you know, again, some of what school choice was is to make your school an attractive option.
But I'm asking
So
the
is that
question,
what-
is it proper? Yeah.
And maybe that's so it'd be interesting to hear back from Bruce. So so we're changing who's talking to Bruce, and I have been involved in.
No, I was going to ask you to ask that in
I know, but I'm saying I was trying to follow up with Bruce to get clarity on this budget, so you can follow up on that.
I will.
And I'm saying to him in my email, actually I could forward you that email. I said to him, I thought there was intention to spend some money there and for preschool, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, so that you don't go into it cold, I'll send you that email and then you can follow up with Bruce.
Okay. See, what I see, and this, tell me if I'm mistaken about this. This is slightly off topic. It's okay. I see that the school committee, or maybe it's the school administration, or maybe both, has made a conscious decision to really, really support and to say pump up the preschool as a way to feed their elementary population.
No.
Is that so?
The town is obligated to meet the special needs of 3-year-olds and up. That's what started the whole preschool program. They know from the COVID situation, they have children in need. If the children's needs are not met when they come to kindergarten, they will be behind the 8 ball. This is happening all over the state. My sister-in-law is doing this in East Long Meadow. So they are trying to meet the needs. And I would imagine this is not what they want to be doing, is running 2 preschool.
Well, I heard people saying with some happiness that our preschool is really full and we're going to be feeding into our elementary system, and we're going to have a really good student body because it's like the minor leagues for our school or something.
So who's moving into town? That's one thing.
See, I don't know.
There's population turning over quite a bit. Houses are turning over. Younger people are coming in.
Older people are dying.
Do you want the school to? They're not seducing people to town.
I'm just saying, it was a simple question. I just got that impression from listening to Jackie that she wanted the preschool to be like a theater.
Well, it should be. Yeah. You want those kids as prepared as you can.
To me, the preschool is babysitting more or less.
Oh, you're wrong.
Yeah.
You should go. It is not. And watching what happened with the fact that people didn't get their kids out of their homes, and what that does.
How did COVID impact the preschool? Did it? It must have.
Yeah. People didn't send their kids, and there wasn't going to be, I don't know, maybe that is part of that number.
Yeah, right.
That probably is why it dropped from 17 to 10. And because also people
with the
didn't
disease
work.
out there, people were at home anyway, so they could take care of their own children at school at home.
It's not childcare. It's not childcare.
Well,
preschool is not childcare. I mean, Nate's daughter is in daycare.
Yeah.
And preschool never fills the niche of daycare because it doesn't do till 5, and it's not that. It's different. And it is a structured socialization with people and materials for kids to learn how to be part of a community. And that is not what you get at your home. And you don't get it when people are not even leaving their house. And so they know already that this is going to impact how kids walk into, and every grade is going to be impacted by what happened over COVID with kids being isolated. And so they need to bump up. They need to.
A lot of these schools are going to have difficulty this year. A lot of kids are going to be, their destinies are going to be impacted by their lack of socialization. I mean, to me, one of the biggest aspects of school that's important is socialization. Because kids can't just be at home with their parents, and that's no way to grow as a person.
Right. So that's why preschool was invented. They already know with Head Start and all those other ones, the impact it makes on a kid's development to have the stimulation and the structure and the socialization. And when you lose that, you are behind the 8 ball. And that is the effort across the state right now to meet those children's needs. But
the state's not supporting it.
No.
So we're going to increase school aid, support it financially. That's something that we have to be aware of and look at.
And the benefit is that those kids do better all along the line. It's giving kids the best.
But we have choice? Do we have students from out of town in our preschool?
I don't think so.
See, those are things I'd like to know as a member of income, because it's costing us money.
I'm
not saying against it.
So the policy.
I'd like to understand it,
Yeah, the policy doesn't include. I think it only says K to 6, and they have to be less than the ideal number of kids in the classroom. They're not going to add more than is ideal. So I had
policy for schools, right?
It's already written. It's in there. So this is the school trying to meet a need as a result of, just offering Head Start, but we don't offer Head Start. So this is most towns offer something in the preschool. There's been a long effort to bring state and federal funding for that, because they know that kids that get that kind of start, handling books, sitting and listening to others, trying to talk, they do much better. And so that, it's not funded yet. We talk about universal kindergarten, it's still not funded everywhere. So we do that, but Is it?
No, the
for
question is
preschool?
really for me is what's a fair, equitable way to fund it? If the community supports it, there used to be tuition for some.
It is, there's a
families,
lot
but-
of it is
yeah,
tuition, but the
yeah.
state did require 3 and up. You have to have a program that can deal with your 3-year-old.
Well, I know that, that's
So-
somewhat a side issue, but I do.
Well, it's why,
It's not just by law, it's reasonable to do that.
well, it's why preschool started
Yeah.
in the public schools. That is why preschool started. And are there more kids with needs? Yes, there are. It's clearly, I mean, it's a little bit, it's overwhelming what's going on in our environment that's making, bodies and people not function as well. And so,
Yeah,
and when you have, an economy where both people are working, that kid's getting less attention at home. So,
yeah, we could talk about this.
but it's why
Forever.
it's needed.
See, to me, I think we need less growth in our economy and more time for people to live their lives,
Yeah, but we're not going to change that. But in the meantime, the upshot is having kids who need to be socialized and stimulated and taught, and not taught ABCs, taught how to be with other kids. And, it's interesting to watch. My granddaughter is totally familiar with books, and
How
she
old is she?
loves books too.
Wow.
And I've really missed being able to take her in the library. So it's like I have books over there and books over here that I have to keep chasing around. And I thought, yeah, a lot of people just don't deal with it. And they know that if a kid has 1,000 books by the time they reach kindergarten, they are way ahead of kids that just don't. So
Yeah.
it's a commitment.
Well, 2. Yeah, well, Catherine's got a grandchild now, it's 6 months old, and it's been kind of fascinating to see this critter.
It is, yeah.
No, it must be fun though.
It is fascinating. It's tiring. I mean, so.
But you have a little bit of separation from it because you're a Grammy now, so
Yeah, and
that's kind of cool
so,
too, right?
yeah, I'm watching this 2-month-old and watching her ability to track something and
Yeah,
turn
right.
her head to do it.
Yeah, and then hand eye and all
First
that
her eye
stuff.
and then,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this thing moves. Wow, that's
Amazing.
amazing. Who knew that?
Yeah, we've been watching this kid
Yeah.
learning how to eat,
Yeah, yeah. But then there's a program was developed by a pediatrician called Reach Out and Read, and they advocate reading books to 1-month-olds.
Mm.
And then you can see that with Nina, that she would focus on anything you show her, and she's taking it in. So there's a lot
great.
to be done. All right, so we know where we're going with this.
So the week before that main trip that I'm going on would be the week for me.
Okay,
That's
so
good for you.
what's that number?
That's,
I should have brought my
I
calendar.
wrote the 24th.
You said 23rd was.
So today is the 2nd, so like in 2 weeks or
16th.
something.
Okay, so,
Let's see, where are we here with school choice?
You wanna
The
try
week of the 16th to 20th or something?
yeah, so you want to try Monday, the 16th at the same time?
Sure.
Okay, that's our next meeting, and we'll have information, and we'll get a sense of how people figured this out or what they do, and see if we can start making some information to pass on and see if we can get it to happen.
All right, we'll do that.
All right.
Okay. Worked out.
And
Did anybody join us?
No, I don't think so. You didn't swear. That's